we need. So the bulk of our meeting today will be spent just sort of recapping where we're at from last time, and then really digging into the opportunities that we have to allocate some additional resources this year. And then we'll take public testimony, wrap up with any discussion, and talk about next steps. So next, can you display the PowerPoint for us, please? Or I just won't say next slide. I'll tell everyone to turn the page. Yeah, you like that one, Jessica? The better option. So close. Good. Okay. So go 2 more slides, please. Perfect. So just as a reminder, this is a convening of our partners and staff who review our financial inputs for our upcoming business year and advise us on discretionary decisions. We hope that this process helps increase community involvement and awareness in how we manage the resources, that you all have a good understanding of the Bureau and our relationship between us and the folks who we are here to serve, and to provide recommendations about our goals, priorities, policies, and budget. And we started that conversation with you last time. Next slide, please. And since that time, this is a slide from last time, but there's a modification to what we're doing in meeting 2. So we really thought we were going to kind of recap what we heard from you and how that informed any budget decisions that we made, and then talk about the process for a support letter from the Budget Advisory Committee. And we still need that. But as I said, now we have some resource allocation recommendations to develop. So next slide, please. So what the process will look like. Next slide, please. Yep, perfect. We will capture the recommendations that you make today. We will combine them with our own recommendations and present them to the Housing Commissioner, which is Commissioner Carmen Rubio. We will circulate a letter to all of you to summarize what you want to communicate to City Council as we submit our budget. And then we will submit our final budget to City Council. Next slide, please. So just a quick snapshot, next slide, please, of our budget timeline. We are in the budget development process. We are, as we talked a bit about last time, as we are now moving into a new form of government, this will be the first time that we will be submitting budgets by service area. So the Housing Bureau will have its own standalone budget, but will also kind of aggregate the budgets in the community and economic development service area for submission to City Council. So just as a reminder, the bureaus in community and economic development are the Portland Housing Bureau, the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, the Bureau of Development Services, Prosper Portland, and new to the service area is Spectator Venues. So budgets get submitted on February 16th, and then we sort of take them out to the public, and then in June, the council will adopt the final budget. Our fiscal year starts on July 1st. So that's when this will all go into effect. Next slide. And one more, please. So Sarah, you noticed that these are the same questions from last time. We're not going to ask you to answer them again, although if you had any searing insights since you left, welcome to let us know. But just as a reminder, these are the questions that we asked you, and next slide, we captured them and want to welcome. Actually, now that you're here, I'll finish this and then we'll pause and do some introductions. Thanks for joining us, though. And super excited that all three of you are here in person. So from the first meeting, the recommendations that you made to us were you expressed your support for our approach to meet the 5% budget constraint in general fund by reducing administrative costs that would not impact services to the community or reduce our workforce. You encouraged us to, and so this was sort of apart from specific budget allocations, but just sort of generally what you would like us to kind of focus on in the year ahead. Operational support for buildings with permanent supportive housing, specifically around security. Services support for permanent supportive housing. And advocacy to increase funding levels and preservation of affordable housing, recognizing that new production is important, but also preserving the stock that we have. Does that sound about right?
I think I had mentioned some sort of an emergency fund for your housing provider infrastructure system that I don't see here.
We will add that.
I mean, I was, the affordable housing providers are struggling beyond the PSH.
Beyond
portfolio.
PSH, okay, yeah.
And I really think this year you're going to have some that need help.
Great. So there's a recommendation that we'll look at that might get at that, but apart from what we've put in here specifically, and it's not so much a yes/no exercise, but not quite that, maybe this. So we will make sure to capture and adjust how we've reflected that here. Thank you. Anything else that we should tweak from or didn't capture quite right from last time? Okay, so we will pause then and do some introductions for folks who are in the room. So maybe we'll start, actually let's start with our friends over at the table over there.
Norma Trujillo, I'm an admin specialist with the Housing Bureau.
Latimia Clayton, the Employee Relations and Business Services Manager.
Jessica Polanco, Office Support Specialist with the Portland Housing Bureau.
Good afternoon, John Trin with the Neighborhood Housing Preservation Manager.
Chris Gustafson, Housing Bureau Financial Analyst.
Angel Landron, Finance and Accounting Manager.
Brianne Dedecker, Manager of the Rental Services Office.
Antoinette Pieka, Interim Policy and Planning Manager.
Michael Bonacore, Interim Director.
Laura Golino de Lovato, Executive Director, Northwest Pilot Project, and Advisory Commission.
Yes.
Sarah Stevenson, Executive Director at Innovative Housing and Co-Chair of the Portland Housing Advisory Commission.
Felicia Tripp, COO of the Contingent and Co-Chair of the Portland Housing Advisory Commission.
Great. And then I think the bulk of folks on screen are from our staff. So let's see if we can, are you able to sort of make their screen bigger for a sec, Norma, or is that as big as we get? It's okay if, there we go, cool. Maybe we'll start at the top. Ayman, would you introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. Ayman Abolajin, Senior Financial Analyst with the Housing Bureau.
And then Tanya.
Hello, everyone. Tanya Wolfersberger. I am a Housing Development Construction Services Manager here at the Housing Bureau.
Jill?
Hi, everyone. Jill Chen. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Housing Investments and Portfolio Preservation Manager.
And Desi?
Hello, Desi Bellamy. I'm a Housing Portfolio Finance Coordinator with BHB.
And Desi is one of our staff representatives on the Budget Advisory Committee. And actually, Desi and Anna, as you introduce yourselves, if there are any edits you would offer for the meeting one recommendations, if there was something we didn't capture quite right or should add, please let us know. Cool. Gina, go ahead.
Hey everyone, I'm Gina Scott, Risk Analysis and Compliance Manager.
Anna?
I'm Anna Shook. I'm the Contract Administrator for the Bureau, and this year I am one of the Bureau staff members serving on the Budget Advisory Committee. I have no edits to what you've done at this time.
Thanks, Anna. Gabriel?
Hi, Gabriel Matthews, Public Information Officer for the Portland Housing Bureau.
Matt?
Hey, Matt Gander, he, him pronouns. I am a Deputy City Attorney who advises the Housing Bureau.
Young?
Young Oyang, I'm with the City Budget Office.
John? Oh no, John's, that's John. Bimal? I don't know, Leslie, are you, okay.
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
in my car on my way there.
Okay. Bimal, yeah, go ahead.
Bimal Razmundari, Data Analyst with the Portland Housing Bureau. He, him, his.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so we are going to dive back in. So if we could have the PowerPoint again, that would be great. Next slide, please. So when we were here last time, we told you that we were, like all city bureaus, asked to find a 5% reduction in our general fund, which we explained is a very small portion of our budget, so we were able to absorb that. But we didn't have a lot of sort of discretionary spending decisions to make. At the time, we knew that we would be getting returning resources from tax increment finance districts, and Angel will explain a little bit more about that in a sec. We were anticipating that those would cover our costs and sort of sustain operations at status quo. Weren't sure if or how much money there would be beyond that. And as it turns out, there is about $2.3 million that's available for us to allocate to programs and services. And so, Angel, could you just say a little bit more about what returning TIF is?
Sure. As part of the consumption of the bonds in fiscal year 27 and also as part of the expiration of the TIF districts, those are the tax finance increment. The City Council adopted in fiscal year 23 a budget note assigning 25% of returning TIF from expired districts to the Housing Bureau. So we are receiving that first portion this fiscal year 25, and that is going to help us to sustain our operation in the futures to come. Otherwise, our operation will be significantly impacted starting fiscal year 27. The closed districts that we are aware of that we are receiving that money are Southern Auditorium, Northwest Front Avenue, and St. John's.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
So a little bit more about how we can spend this money. It's money that we have to budget as one-time expenses versus funding for ongoing services or programs. And so that was some of what went into some of the options that that is relevant to all of the options that we provided. And then we also gave some consideration to our ability to move this money out into the community kind of expeditiously without creating sort of new, elaborate processes that are either harder for our partners to access or for us to sort of create process around. And just really gave some thought to what we see as priorities, including existing programs that serve vulnerable populations and advance equity in the community, as well as the recommendations that we heard from you all last time about what we should be focused on. So what I'm going to do is walk through these. There's one per slide, and then there's a slide that has a table with all of them on it. And at that point, we can talk about things that you would prioritize, whether there are things you suggest that we add, whether you think, something should get more or less than what we've kind of tagged as the price tag for it. So as we go through these slides, what would be great is if you have just sort of clarification questions, please jump in and ask those. But if you have sort of reactions about what should be prioritized, if you would kind of save those ideas until we get to the sort of that summary slide. Yeah, please.
I have a clarification question. So the total amount for fiscal 25 is 7.6 million.
That's the total amount of returning
That's the
TIF.
total amount, and 2.3 million is allocated to PHB programs and services. Remaining balance supports PHB operations.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. We and Prosper Portland each got an $8 million allocation. The 5% general fund reduction that we told you about came off the top of that, so that got us to 7.6 million. We've been, both Prosper and PHB have been given direction and support from the Commissioner's Office that we should, as Angel said, make sure that we're sustaining our operations and our capacity to, keep programs moving out in the community. So that's sort of the first slice that we address, and then the rest is flexible funds that we can, with your guidance, allocate.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, please.
We anticipated this last time in the budget that was presented? Did we anticipate returning funds?
We did know that there would be returning TIF. We didn't know how, we weren't far enough in the budget process to know that there would be this 2.3 million left.
But your staff was kept whole before this. So is this additional staff members?
We knew that we knew that the returning TIF would be enough, or we anticipated it would be enough to cover. We just didn't know that there would be this much left beyond that. But yeah, we're sustaining staffing levels as they are, but we're not adding. Yeah. Any other clarifications before I move into options? And then for folks on the screen, like if someone raises their hand, can you see that, Norma? Okay, great. Yeah, so if you're on screen and you have a question or comment, please feel free to raise your hand. Norma will spot it. So the first, next slide, please. First option that we have before you is preservation funding for affordable housing. So in this case, you all may know, we recently put out a solicitation for preservation projects. We made 2 awards, as is almost always the case. We had more agencies that we would like to help than we had funding for. So recognizing that preservation is a key issue, and because we just had a competitive process. We have folks who have, sort of competed and gone through the process that we could funnel money to. So $1 million is a, sort of a good round number. Sarah certainly knows, that goes fast when you're looking at systems replacements and things. Yeah. Yeah. And so I guess another note to offer is the total that you may have seen in all of these recommendations adds up to about 3.4 million. So we intentionally put more in front of you than we have money for, because we didn't want to sort of say like, here's 2.3 million worth of ideas. That seems good, right? So there is some ability to, to prioritize, to sort of say this number should be bigger or smaller. So that is welcomed, yes. Go ahead.
I don't know if you want this now or later. On the preservation pot and table, the last round that went out was only eligible for projects that had PHB funding in it, right? So on its face, that makes a lot of sense. In practice, there are many affordable restricted properties in Portland that do not have PHB funding that still need to be preserved. So my question is, what's PHB's thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, I will offer an answer, and then, we've got Jill on the line as well, who might want to offer thoughts. I think, what we saw in this, again, in this application round is that by offering it to the pool of folks that we already fund and regulate, we still had much more, we were still very oversubscribed. We take your feedback and our own experience as a call to not just sort of do what we can with our own resources, but to advocate, at this. I mean, there's a very active conversation about how we advocate at the state for this issue, because it's so much bigger than what we've got available to us. And we also have sort of, again, not PHB regulated or funded projects where there's expiring affordability, on the horizon. So yeah, it's a really big issue. Jill, is there anything you want to add on top of that?
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. And thank you, Sarah, for raising this. Just as an FYI, we know that preservation funding is critical as a point of reference in our last request for information for preservation. We had put out about 4.8 million, plus, Portland Clean Energy Funds. In response, we had almost $31 million request for rehab and almost 10 million for just clean energy components. So that's over $40 million for a $4 million, you can call it, availability of funds. So we agree, Sarah, that the need is huge. And I think the goal for us as a Bureau is trying to figure out how we could cobble resources and provide a steady understanding for the community, our affordable housing owners, to understand that preservation is going to be an ongoing thing. We're just trying to cobble the different pieces of funding for that, so it could become a regular thing. And this, like Michael says, is not going to capture the expiring regulatory agreements. Those are just significant. We ran the numbers, and it looks like over the next 10 years, we will have, I think the numbers look like it's over, I want to say 1,300 units, I think, that is going to expire. I mean, that's the equivalent of one Portland bond or one Metro bond. So it's huge. So we agree with you. I think a huge amount of advocacy is needed at the state level, and hoping that in the short session, something might happen.
Thanks. Anything else on this one? Next slide, please. Master plan for Ellington redevelopment. So folks may remember that the Ellington was the first property purchased with the Portland Housing Bond Funds. And the property was at significant risk for being flipped to market rate. So by purchasing it, we preserved its affordability, and then found ourselves with a bit of a conundrum because there's really significant rehab needs, yes, but really, truly redevelopment needs at the property, and Portland Housing Bond Funds, that's not an eligible use of them. So we could buy it, but we couldn't fix it with those funds. So we have been, with Home Forward as our asset manager, kind of holding things together at the Ellington, and we will continue to do that. But there's a, sort of a multi-year effort required to, sort of take it down to the infrastructure and redevelop it. So if we were to use these resources to pay for the master planning, we would then be able to preserve the property reserves that we have at the Ellington, which are really needed in order to just sort of sustain operations until we can sort of do this deeper redevelopment work. So I'll stop there and see if there are questions about this. Okay, next slide. Additional grants to PSH providers. So this, Sarah, reflects not fully, but some of what we heard, and definitely something we are seeing and in very active conversation about in terms of, just sort of PSH generally in the community, sort of both what we can do in our role and also how we can sort of advocate and support, other resource allocations. For example, I think Laura talked about the need for increased service levels, and so we're engaged with the Joint Office around encouraging that, and I think we'll see movement on that soon. So this, again, is, relative to the scale of need, not a huge amount of not a huge amount of money, but, something we could sort of put on the table and, hopefully leverage other commitments towards this end. So, as we talk about prioritization and whether, sort of any of these either definitions of what might be eligible should be expanded or dollar amounts should be bigger, that's all fair game. So next slide, please. Prepare Mount Tabor Annex property for development. So this one is a property that we own and is something we want to see redeveloped into affordable housing. It's not in a TIF district. We're sort of out of housing bond funds, so there's not really, at the moment, a plan. We can't just sort of offer this property to Sarah and say, like, congratulations, you can develop this, because that's not so helpful without, some cash. And step one is there's a building on the property. It was formerly, I think, a YMCA that needs to be deconstructed. And we need a sort of a community outreach process in order to, take the next step towards this being something that can be developed, and then hopefully paired with enough money that we could, offer it to an affordable housing provider to develop, and that would actually be a a manageable proposition. So this would be step one. We're just in a funny place with it where, there's not sort of a dedicated pot of money. We just own it. We are paying for security, and there are, sort of building infrastructure, building systems that need to be maintained. So there's a cost for us to hold it. And there are sort of risks and exposure because we have issues with squatters and such with the property. So this would allow us to kind of minimize that and reduce risk and get it ready to, be that much closer to being redeveloped for affordable housing. Questions on that one? Sure. Yeah. Eviction legal defense. So Brian is here and has been managing our eviction legal defense program, which has been quite robust in the past few years, in the magnitude of a couple $1 million a year, Brian? $3 million this year. And so that's been really critical in keeping folks stable in their housing. A lot of the funding that has been available for it, such as ARPA, is going away. So in the absence of some additional funds this year, we will see it reduced from $3 million in this year to $1.5 million. So next year. So, this is just one of those things where every dollar can count in terms of how many households we're trying to keep stable in their housing. Questions on this or anything you would add, Brian? Okay. Next slide, please. Down payment assistance loans. I think you all know, but a lot of, maybe not everybody in the community knows that we help folks with home ownership. And this, if we added some funds here, it would allow us to help some folks in some areas of the city where we don't have dedicated, we call this DPAL, where we don't have dedicated DPAL assistance. So, for example, in the interstate corridor, we have down payment assistance funding that is available specifically for that geography and for preference policy families. But there's a lot of the geography of Portland where we don't have dedicated funding. There is funding available, but this would make home ownership available to more families in more areas of the county. John, did I get that right? City.
Yes. Got that right.
I'm fading, folks. I'm going to need backup. Yeah, right. Next slide, please. Home repair grants. This is another critical program to help maintain the stability of folks who own homes throughout the city. And so if we added funds to this pot, it would help us support some additional households with up to $15,000 in home repair grants. And you can see in the picture here, that's not just a nice coat of paint. It is, sort of restoring siding and gutters and, often windows and things that improve both safety and, just sort of the life cycle of homes for folks. Yeah, cool. Okay, got that right. Any questions before we dive into the summary? So what you have when you look at this table is just sort of everything that we just walked through at a glance. If it's helpful to rewind to any of the slides, we can do that. But this is sort of each of them and their dollar amounts. So I think what I will do is just open the floor to our advisory committee members and see what comments, what reactions, ideas you have.
Can you explain what it says may be eligible for other funding sources?
Oh, thank
Last
you.
item?
Yes. So we have existing pots of money that are available that could fund these 3 asterisked programs if they were not prioritized here. So everything is a trade-off in some fashion, but in this case, there are funds that we have access to that are, sort of planned for over a span of years. They're not necessarily sort of like use them or lose them funds in this year. So we just wanted to be transparent that, as you're thinking about how to prioritize things, if you wanted to recommend to us that we consider some other source of funding that we have control over, that we could that could be part of our consideration.
To that point, there would be enough in other funds to cover these estimated amounts? Yes? No? Maybe?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think we would, once we sort of arrived at the 2.3 million here, it would be sort of a separate, exercise of thinking about these 3 and is this the right dollar amount, or do we do it this year, or sort of use the resources we already have allocated. But that is we could do these dollar amounts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question? How much is budgeted for down payment assistance in total, like in the budget without this 500,000?
So we have, currently the funds that we have budgeted for down payment assistance are primarily interstate TIF. So those are restricted to the district. We do have a little bit of CDBG, a little bit of short-term rental that gets split up amongst our partners. And currently in interstate, we go up to $100,000. So somebody would get a $100,000 down payment assistance loan. Outside of the district, we leave that to our partners based on the need of the particular family, except for preference policy families. They get $100,000 regardless of where they purchase. John's looking up the exact amount, but we do have a little bit that goes out citywide, but this would provide additional resources for citywide purchases, where we know that housing prices in East Portland are less than they are in the district. The average in interstate right now, I think, is $515,000, up from, I think it was $320 when we started the North-Northeast housing strategy. So over $200,000 increase in 8 years. So, John,
Let me circle back on you on that number for you, Sarah. Sure.
No, we'll find it and come back to that. Other questions or ideas, Felicia?
I was going to say, when I look at the amount of money going to our PSH providers and what Sarah said earlier about emergency funding and the preservation funding for affordable housing, I don't know how we can't justify increasing that or keeping those, because as I am thinking about our nonprofit housing partners, how crucial that funding is. I'm not saying that the master plan for Ellington or preparing Mount Tabor isn't important, but just to see the sheer demand on the portfolio of our CDC partners, I just see that as just for me personally a greater priority.
Great. Well, we have no sort of defensiveness about these dollar amounts or anything. So if you want to propose what a number is that would feel better, we're super open to hearing that. So yeah. And you all don't, like, the point of today does not have to be we come to consensus on what is $2.3 million. So yeah, so that's also okay.
So I guess for me, looking at this pot of one-time funds and how we best spend it, it would be really helpful to understand for each of these, or for most of them, what's the current amount and how much do we get with this new amount proposed? So say with the additional grants for PSH providers. So it's an additional $500,000 on top of how much? And how many units and how many households is it going to support? You know,
Sure.
sort of, and
Yep.
I can't really believe I'm saying this, but what's the, you know, the bang for the buck?
Yep.
Sort of. But what is, how do we contextualize it? Sort of to Felicia's point about what does this give us? Because I also look at the master plan for the Ellington development and think, okay, $500,000 for master plan, that gets us part way to a really big project. Have we scoped out what the rest of the project's going to cost? And then there's a wait time versus investing now in things that are more immediate,
Yep.
immediately impact our housing ecosystem.
Yep.
And I think that I also feel that way about the Mount Tabor property. I understand the risk management issues, but I really think, wow, that $500,000 to take step one on that property and then pause and wait for the next tranche of funding to do the next thing could be maybe utilized elsewhere.
Yeah.
So, but in order to really sort of assess all of that, I feel like I need to understand more about, like the home repair grants. How many more households is that going to help at 15,000? That's not a lot. If it was, instead of 200,000, if that was a $500,000 amount. So that's sort of what I had. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let me try to kind of muddle my way through that and see how satisfying my answer is. This is great. I mean, yeah, I appreciate all of that. So let's start with additional grants to PSH providers. So we're sort of in a moment where we are trying to, we're about to engage more with the joint office. Commissioner Rubio is, attuned to this. And we are going to be coming separate from the budget process, sort of coming back to the provider community and talking about ways in which the Bureau can be helpful, which are, not necessarily, given the scale of need, it's not going to be Bureau money that really sort of saves the day, but we also want to sort of come to the table with some meaningful stuff. And I think there are some policy and practice things we can offer as support as well. But we also just want to sort of say to our, sort of county and joint office partners, like, we're not just pushing you to do more, like we're putting something on the table as well. So we're, I can't yet say for sure that in this fiscal year, which is between January and June, we're going to put $500,000 on the table, which would make this an additional $500,000 in next fiscal year. But we're circling that. And again, just like really pushing hard to figure out like how can we meaningfully recognize how hard it is out there now, and hopefully be able to leverage whatever commitments we're making to encourage others to do the same. And that could be the state, it could be other sources beyond just the county and the joint office. But so this is this is us recognizing if we were to do $500,000 now, that could help. And another amount of money in the next fiscal year will still be, helpful. And, how do we set the right parameters on that? I think there are lots of questions there too. So this is sort of like, well, let's potentially earmark some money so that we've dedicated it, and then talk about like how is that going to be most sort of helpful to folks. In terms of bang for the buck, we're as I said, we're sort of immersing ourselves into this to such a degree that we're doing some data dives to sort of understand the PSH universe better, and still sort of one of the questions we have to hone in on is how many PSH providers are there, and so what does that mean if you divide 500,000 by whatever the number of PSH providers is? Yeah. So this, some things are sort of more fully formed than others, sort of we know our way around eviction legal defense. And here we're sort of saying like, there's this crisis emerging, set some money aside and then we'll figure, we'll hone in on what the best answers are. And so, yeah, again, is it security focused? Is it available to all PSH providers? How does that work? What's going to be the most impactful? I think we're not entirely there, but want to get there in a meaningful way. In terms of the master planner for the Ellington redevelopment, just to say a bit more here, and maybe turn to Tanya, who's on screen for us. The Ellington. The property is about 11 acres. As I said, like it really needs, Band-Aids at the Ellington are expensive because they're never gonna get us to a point where we can say like, okay, we've caught up and everything's solid. It's a really old, the buildings are really old. And then in terms of the size of the property, there's an opportunity with zoning and that much acreage to increase density in an area of the city where that would be really great for affordable housing. If we're going to do any of that, given the scale of the property and the fact that it would have to be phased, both because of its size and by virtue of phasing it, we could then relocate folks within the property and not displace them from the property when redevelopment was happening. We can't cobble this together. Like we need a master planner to help us understand the considerations that would go into it. And so right now, the resource that's available for this is property reserves for the Ellington. And given its size and age, $400,000 can be gone in a blink. Like the property reserves, and because of the amount of time it's going to take us to fully redevelop, could get tapped out just super duper quick. So this is if we were to prioritize this, it would sort of be preserving those reserves and helping us. Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the question and the push. And then in terms of Mount Tabor, I'm not gonna lie, this is like the least sexy thing on here. And it has we hold this property. At some point we have to find the money, and probably money that could be spent somewhere else to do this unsexy work. I sure hope, another big housing bond comes along and that answer there are some big, easy answers. So right now we're just sort of faced with, we're holding it. We don't know where money would come from, and it presents risk for us. No. Well, Tanya, before I definitively say no, I don't believe it is, but what would you say?
But it's presenting risk, or?
Sorry, my
was there a
question without my
that I didn't hear?
microphone on is the building usable? I mean, you talked about maintaining systems. I would assume it's all shut down, but if you're maintaining systems, it sounds like it might be somewhat functional. And I'm just wondering if it could be used for something as an interim holding plan.
Yeah, that unfortunately it cannot. When we acquired the property from, I think through Prosper from Parks and Rec, there was an active YMCA preschool business running out of there. They decided not to renew their lease because we knew that there were some serious kind of structural issues coming down, and also some lead and asbestos issues that were just too expensive to repair. And we would have to kind of either temporarily or permanently displace the YMCA in order to address those issues. And so we decided to leave the building vacant. It's really not functional without really deep abatement and rehab and maybe restructuring as well. So we have some kind of monitoring systems that we're required to keep in place from the Fire Bureau and Water Bureau as well, for the sprinkler system and other systems. So those are kind of our ongoing costs, aside from security and, maintaining safety when we have wind and ice storms with all it's very tree lined. So those are some of the systems, but it's really not functional for housing any kind of business or any kind of programs there other than maybe storage.
I'm going to peek over at John. Were you able to?
Yes, right now we have about $2.69 million for down payment assistance. If you were to say what's over in the IKEA or the interstate, we have about $1.35 million. So that leaves us with 1.345 for citywide.
And so that's maybe 15-ish homeowners?
Well, it depends on who the money is contracted to, because some our contracts are somebody might need 20,000, somebody else might need 60,000, somebody else might need only 40,000. So there's outside of the district and outside of what we do for interstate folks, or preference policy, preference policy folks, it's up to the agency of how they work with folks that need down payment assistance. So it could be 10, it could be 22, depending upon how much they need.
Okay. Is that helpful?
I have a
Please.
question about something else.
Okay.
We're bouncing around a little bit.
Great. Yeah, no, we can bounce.
And I guess this is probably an irritating question too. I've run some board meetings where you bring all this material and then people ask questions that you've already explored, so I apologize. But the PSH provider money, I will never say we shouldn't provide more funding to support PSH. You'll never hear that from me. But I hear we have a lot of unspent SHS money.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering why you use really limited PHB dollars when your partner has a lot of money that they're not putting out.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically for this population.
Mm-hmm.
Because the other thing that I think we need to talk about is that it's not just PSH providers that need help. It is a very focused group of buildings in the central city that are extremely distressed right now, and they are not all PSH.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very geographically based,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very City of Portland based, and it feels like the city needs to talk about that
Mm-hmm.
and then provide support for buildings that are not PSH but are city resources.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say, and I agree with Sarah on that joint collaboration on this particular subpopulation is really important for two reasons. One, that Sarah mentioned, but two, in regards to our housing crisis, it is the population that's also the most visible,
Mm-hmm.
that our residents in the city is asking us to address. So it's something that I'm thinking as a City of Portland resident, as someone that's worked in affordable housing for years, it gives us a real opportunity to do that collaboration that meets the needs of our residents and meets the needs of these providers. And it is a concentrated area that I think should get priority and focus.
Mm-hmm. And just, I just want to make sure I sorted what you were saying, Felicia. I heard the sort of the shared interest in the geography, and was that also sort of more expansive than just PSH? Okay, great. Not annoying, but at all. By the way, this is great. Thank you. Go ahead.
I'll just say that I think this is a really interesting time, to your point, Sarah, about the SHS funding, when the estimates are looking for it to be significantly larger amounts annually. I'm sure you know this. Metro is looking at putting a measure on the ballot to reallocate some of the funding specifically for construction, for building. I think from the perspective of a service provider that gets the dollars from SHS for the service provision piece of PSH, of SHS for PSH clients, I think we want to be really thoughtful about saying, ooh, look at all that money in SHS that hasn't been spent. We could use it for this. And so I would encourage all of you to say, what's the full picture of PSH provision? It's the buildings, because without the buildings, there's no PSH. It's the rent assistance, it's the service provision. And so how does the SHS resource, which was really intended to be service provision to two specific populations, while it can be used for construction, as I understand it, that was not the intent. So if we start saying we're going to look to our joint office partner to cover some of the costs that PHB would normally do, what is the bigger picture? So I would just say, PHB would, I think, be well served to be a big picture partner and really look at the whole thing and encourage the joint office and Metro to do the same. And really say, what is the big takeaway with PSH? We need the buildings, we need the rent assistance for sure, we need the service provision. What does it look like when we look at all three, in addition to the assets that we bring? So I would really encourage that, because it feels like with the additional estimates about SHS, that it feels like people are just saying, oh, look, we could just use that money and take that money. We're not thinking strategically.
And not to try to turn this into a wordsmithing exercise at all, but is there a reframe that anybody would offer in terms of like how we should capture this? We could say grants to support central city affordable housing providers. I want to make sure I'm capturing that, just, that we take away kind of, we get right what you're.
I mean, that would broaden the bucket of eligible properties.
I think Michael, I like where you're going, because the more broad we can go, the more of this population we actually can serve. What I have found in our industry, the more narrow we are, in actuality, the less people we've been able to serve, and just being in this business for almost 3 decades. So I think if we can make it for that geographic area, because we have so many of those buildings in that area, I think, and in it, if there's a way to incentivize the providers, the joint office, and the city, if we can get some sort of RFP that's much more open to create this collaboration, because Laura is right. In all of these conversations, they've been very siloed. Each entity has their ideas. So if there was some way in the process we're getting more people to the table, so that I don't want to call it forced collaboration, because that's really an oxymoron, but you know what I'm saying.
Sometimes it works.
Yeah, you know what I mean? But really, because historically, the joint office hasn't had the best reputation when it comes to collaboration, I'll say it aloud, and this can give them, under their new leadership, that real opportunity as well.
Please, yeah.
I know I've been talking about downtown, and it's very much on my mind. We've got a lot of really challenging problems there right now. I'm sitting in this room thinking, I have had similar conversations with the Northeast Housers about needing specific emergency funding to support that portfolio. So if we limit it only, I mean, I don't know if there's other money to provide support in that way, but I'm suddenly now being a little nervous about limiting it to the central city when I also belong to that table.
Yeah, no,
outside of the
I hear
central
that.
city that has been talking about needing support.
So we could we could amend our language to include the Northeast properties, or we could break that out separately.
And we could talk to that committee as well, and Bishop Holt and that crew. But I do think there needs to, as someone that, of course, I also live in North and Northeast, but I do think that there has to be a prioritization of downtown. Not only, and I can't believe I'm really saying it, because it's the community is really asking us to prioritize it with their tax dollars, and we are the city. So I think to really show them in this round that we are prioritizing it is really important. We have been prioritizing North and Northeast over the last at least 5 to 7 years, and I think we should continue to have that commitment. But I think we can go back to Bishop Holt and that group and say, hey, here's another idea that came out of back and being able to support and hear from that committee, so that we're not just making that assumption. But I just wanted to throw both of those out there to get more voices at the table, so that you feel like, Michael, you're not just working in a silo as well.
Thanks. Leslie, any thoughts you want to offer about that?
I don't want to disagree with Ms. Felicia, but I think if you ask the Oversight Committee, they're going to say, we need more money to support those 6 buildings. The number of issues and concerns that come to me, that come to them individually about safety, security, repairs. You know, I drive by these, buildings with broken windows, broken doors. It takes forever to get them fixed. So while I agree that downtown needs a lot of support, if you ask the Oversight Committee, they're going to say, we need some more money on MLK and in these buildings. So I think it's a both and.
Yep, I agree with Ms. Leslie. As someone that sits on both committees, I was trying to remain neutral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I'll ask this again, not because we need to land on a specific answer, but like any other thoughts about whether you would encourage us to take away from this conversation that we should look discreetly at each of those areas and what we might do, or if we should bundle them as sort of like, these are priority geographies, think about how we might invest in both. I mean, I think just off the top of my head, and others can help me, if we're going to make sort of an additional appropriation to Northeast, I think we would probably want to look at what dedicated resources we have for that in a way that we don't in Central City. But I don't know that that's leads to one solution or another, other than we might just sort of distinguish which stream of money is doing what while we're prioritizing both as geographies.
I mean, if we're broadening the conversation and talking about partnerships and advocacy, dumping money into security is absolutely essential, but it's a black hole. It's just money spent. It feels like maybe advocating within the city bureaus for additional public safety resources might be a better use of Bureau time.
Well, what I was thinking of here, which doesn't mean that it has to be that, but because these are specifically one-time funds, that there may be, and again, thinking about, this money, each allocation starts to dwindle when we're thinking about a universe of providers. Let's say it's $50,000 per, that could be an upgrade of a security camera system, and that's what that does, And so I think paired with that is the idea of how are we advocating with our with our city partners about, the cameras are not going to solve anything by themselves, right? And is there a conversation? I mean, something we have talked about a little bit is as we're trying to convene these conversations, are there ways to maybe support providers, but also see if there are ways to sort of pool resources and share, within a geography, so that no one provider is bearing as much of the expense, and maybe there's a way that we can help offset some of that.
So here's the other thing, Michael, thinking about the master plan for Ellington and preparing Mount Tabor Annex. Prosper goes to Metro a lot for the excise tax on their sort of redevelopment and other thing. Is that a possibility for the city to do as well? I'm just trying to think of other ways of collaboration, because we do have the excise tax too. So I'm not saying we can, but I'm just thinking of other possibilities in utilizing other government entities for us to collaborate or use their resources.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll turn to others and see if there's a thought or.
Which excise tax are you talking about?
Metro, you know how you can do the grant and the planning, and Prosper comes for that? They're the biggest ones that I see in the Portland area that comes for those dollars.
Yeah, I don't know that what we want to do with the Ellington is an eligible use, which always is written into these, very detailed about what you can use the money for and what you can't. So we'd have to research whether or not it was an eligible use. Like, we have other funding streams, but they have very specific eligible uses, which is why general fund, if we were going to do this, would be the easiest way for us to do it, outside of using the reserves.
Right.
Because our other funding streams are restricted to sticks and bricks, or they're restricted to, down payment assistance or whatever, that we've been able to squeeze out of other, other sources. So we can do some research on whether or not that is an eligible use.
You always know eligible uses, so I know you would figure that out. So my personal opinion, Michael, going back to PHB, so I can provide some guidance. You hear from the three of us in particular, and ladies, please speak up. Being able to help, especially people that working with our PSH providers, is a priority for us. We can let you know that. Just in general, we also think that the Central District is a priority, and we also think North and Northeast is a priority. All of these things on this list are important, and we want you to know that. But when looking at this and looking at what we're hearing, at least for me, hearing back from the community, the number one conversation I have is around PSH. I mean, when I'm going into meetings, it is really around what are we going to do with this big tsunami hitting us. And so we're just trying to let you know, as a city, the conversations are happening outside of us, and we just want you to know that that's what we're hearing. But we also want you to know that all of this is a priority. All of it is. But the information we're giving you is also what we're hearing back out in the community. So I don't know if that is helpful.
It is helpful, and what the feedback you're offering is welcomed. I hope it feels welcomed. Yeah. Good. And in terms of process, not that we're done here at all, but if, for example, we were to Thanks, folks. No, no more ideas. I'm just kidding. You know, if we were to end today with a like sort of a clear set of recommendations from you all, and there was some daylight between your recommendations and ours. Let's say we left here and we felt like yes to almost all of this, but we've got to do the Ellington. And I'm not saying that's going to happen. Like we'll be clear with the commissioner if there's any difference between what we recommend and what you recommend. What we hope and what I think is likely is that your recommendations will be our recommendations to the commissioner. But yeah, again, you can take this apart and pull it back together, and we're happy to. Yeah, I mean it's why you're here. So thank you.
I think if you're going back to our commissioner, I think the theme you've heard from the three of us is multi-jurisdiction collaboration is what we're really asking for. Because when I think, for example, let's take Mount Tabor Annex, right? It used to be a preschool. Our state, Oregon Housing Community Services has prioritized buildings with childcare units on the bottom as a priority funding thing, And so I'm thinking, well, they already had a preschool at the bottom. If we're going to collaborate with the state, if we did this demolishing of this, wouldn't we kind of try to come up with some RFP where we could guarantee that that property could get some funding from the state? What I've heard throughout our 90 minutes of conversation from everybody is more of that, how do we get that multi-jurisdiction collaboration? Because that's going to get us more bang for our dollars in addressing this big behemoth of a problem we have. So I think that's the biggest theme I see. If you're going back to the commissioner saying, yes, here are the priorities, but they want you also to know we really want to see much more collaboration between the county and the city and the city and the state and the city and metro. And how are you going to do that when answering back out to the voters? That's what I would say.
Yeah, that's great. And actually, just to sort of circle to I mean, this is probably familiar to you, but the letter that we'll ask you to write in support of this will articulate all of this as well. So also the mayor and city council will be an audience for that message. So we'll make sure we get that right. We capture that right. Yeah.
So I'm going to be like sort of go out on a limb here and say, because Felicia, you're absolutely right. These are all really important, but I think some things are more critical and time sensitive than others. So if we took eviction legal defense, down payment assistance loans, home repair grants, which are asterisked.
Yes.
Yeah, that is
Starred.
the word. Starred, thank you. As being eligible, may be eligible for other funding sources, and took those out of this, that's $1 million right there. Take those out. And then look at what's left and how do we take those out of the mix and then see where we are in terms of priority.
So let's see if we can break it. No, I love it. Let's see if we can sort of break this into pieces. Is there consensus among the three of you to remove the 3 asterisked?
Michael, can I interrupt just a little bit?
Sure.
We need to make sure that we're including the 2 staff.
Thank you.
We need to make sure that their voices are heard because they are officially part of the back. It's not just these 3.
Thank you, Leslie.
Yes, you're welcome.
Yes. Well, let me start in the room, and then we'll give Anna and Desi both the opportunity to speak to that, and also anything that I have failed to include them in thus far. Any thoughts that you both have?
Well, given that there's an asterisk there, I feel like you kind of walked us to that, and there are other funds to pay for these things. I think they're important. I will say, whenever we have a little bit of money, my default is to use it for home ownership because it allows you bigger bang for your buck than $3.4 million will ever do on a multifamily. So I tilt that way. But if you have funds from other pots that could meet these needs, then I agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
I agree with Sarah, except I do think because down payment assistance funds are so hard to come by overall, that's the only one where I'd be like, if you could keep that, I think that, only because of what Sarah said, home ownership it's also when we have our community meetings, it's always at the top of the list. So I'm also thinking about what we hear in our listening sessions about how that is so important. So that would be the only change I would say.
Okay. Desi and Anna, first, my apologies for not checking in with you sooner. You have the floor, and you can speak to whatever you're inspired to speak to.
Thank you. No, I think it's really inspiring to hear just the level of experience we have on the advisory committee with, and so I definitely echo the same types of issues that preservation and PSH operational subsidy, PSH in general, they're huge issues. Housing crisis is a correct term, and we need to continue to advocate for that. And I think as far as removing the items with asterisks, I don't know if as staff I could really speak to that, because I could say yes, we should; those could be taken off the table. But I have a bit of an interest in preservation and PSH and some of those other items as my role at the Bureau. And so I will leave that to our other committee members who are very seasoned in their understanding. Yeah, and so that's all I would add, is that I just, this is really highlighting that we need more funds for all of these things. And the other thing I would say with the Ellington and with Mount Tabor is that if we did an analysis of how much we're spending on Mount Tabor in security and other maintenance costs, and what we could have as an impact for a small portion of money put into furthering it along so that it's it's ready for development, then I think that money could be switched over to PSH, but PSH and preservation to me seem to be issues that are multi-jurisdiction, needing ongoing discussions and a much bigger pot of money to address those. And so it's I'm in support of setting a small amount aside to move along Ellington and Mount Tabor, and yeah, that's it.
Thanks. And Anna, before we come to you, I should touch on, for the benefit of the whole community or committee, we did take a look at sort of what are our holding costs at Mount Tabor, and I think Tanya can offer a more specific example. What I can say is they're not nothing. It would save us some money to demolish it, but it's not, it's not sort of that stark, like, oh, if we spend $500,000, we'll save $600,000. It's not. We would save some money. There would be some offset, but it's not so super stark. Anna, go ahead.
Yeah, in terms of the asterisk programs, I think I sort of lean on the side of funding the home ownership over the other two, although all three of them are really critical. I come from a background with members of my family who worked in homelessness prevention, so I know that PSH is something we always need, but it costs a lot. And we need a dedicated funding source. We need a lot more funding in that area, and that's a critical need. On the other hand, homeownership is a thing that moves people out of poverty for good. And very few of our other programs do it that well. And that also frees up housing that those people were living in, that's rental housing. So I think it's really super important. It's also what our community wants the most when we have neighborhood meetings and budget meetings and hearings. And so those are kind of my thoughts on those. I agree that it's kind of frustrating that Mount Tabor is where it is, but I trust the experts on what would be the best plan for the short term for that one. I don't really feel like I have enough information on it to weigh in.
Thank you, Anna. So, Laura, as you stroll back, I wonder how you might feel about an amendment to your proposal, which is to keep down payment assistance loans on the list, but remove the other two asterisked programs.
I support that.
Okay. Okay. All right. There's $500,000. We're getting somewhere. Nice. Okay. So what we have is your encouragement to look at the other potential sources of funding for home repair grants and eviction legal defense and remove them from this list. Keep down payment assistance loans on, and then in terms of so we're changing additional grants to PSH providers to reflect, so as I've captured it, grants to support Central City affordable housing providers and grants to support Northeast affordable housing providers, which may be one line item or two. But both of those things we heard clearly are important. Yeah. Okay. Would anyone like to suggest whether $500,000 for those two geographies, whether they're sort of bundled as one or separate, that's an amount of money you want to see reflected? Is it higher or lower? Boldness is welcomed.
I wouldn't allocate an amount to each of the regions, rather leave it open.
Okay.
Wait and see. Although more total dollars would be good, but.
Yeah, I think 500,000 is a pretty small number for that. But that's what we have. I see that.
No, I mean, we can move numbers around, so. Felicia, any thoughts? Nope. My secret goal is to exhaust you all. Desi or Anna, anything you want to weigh in on about this Central City Northeast allocation?
Not for me, no.
Okay. Okay, so unless I get a push to do otherwise, we'll keep the dollar amount at 500,000 and specify.
Michael, can I interrupt you? So for the Mount Tabor Annex property, 500,000 is what's estimated to address those security, the systems?
Essentially,
or is it demolition?
Essentially, it's demolition. There's also a component of community outreach and engagement. Tanya will help me on this. It's an historic property, so there are some. Yeah, am I right, Tanya?
That's correct. It is a historic property, so we have to go through the State Preservation Historic Office and meet some of their requirements, particularly around some community outreach aspects, in addition to what we would normally do as we kind of prepare properties for development and solicitation.
My
So
point.
this is a gift from our city partners.
Yeah. I guess I was trying to get at was, could that
Could it be
5,000 be cut to 500,000 be cut to 300,000? So, shave a little bit off of that, but
Yeah.
it sounds like maybe not.
I don't know, Tanya. I mean, I don't know if we budget for an amount that's too low, if we would then be able to spend it in this year or wait until we got more.
Tanya, I'll jump in real quick. So say you decided to reduce it and it stays in, so you split it in half and said, we'll give you $250,000 this year. We could delay the start so that we could technically overlap it into another fiscal year and then put money in 2 fiscal years to cover that 500,000. Technically, we could, but depending upon how quickly things go, or if we run into problems in this fiscal year, we could end up having to find more money because they get started and it's like, oh crap, we thought we were only gonna spend $250 and now it's gonna cost $400 just to do this part, and it's gonna cost another $200 or whatever for the rest. So it's always a dicey kind of situation to do stuff over 2 fiscal years. Not to say that we can't do it, it's just more of a risk.
I hear you. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So Tanya, any other thoughts about reduction in the dollar amount? And also Sarah asked a question, I don't know if you heard it, about what is the nature of how it's historical? Just its age, or is it?
It's registered as a historic building,
Okay.
so yeah, it's on the list as, I don't know if it's historically contributing, maybe the designation that it's at, but we still have to, we've kind of had some short conversations with SHPO just to understand what the process we would need to go through to prepare for deconstruction. So that's kind of informing our some of our estimated budget amounts and kind of timeline. If we did reduce it, then we would just kind of be able to do probably the preliminary work leading up to deconstruction, but not fully run a full procurement to hire a deconstruction contractor.
And I know it's squishy math, Tanya, but if there was a lower number, is there a number that we could do some work with?
It's very squishy. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe if you did 250 to 3.
Yeah, I think the trick with this one, with Leslie's idea, is that we could sort of time it, but the trick with this one in particular, and Tanya, help me if I'm wrong, we don't know where the rest of the money comes from in the following fiscal year. Is that right? Like, it's just, we don't know that it exists.
But we don't know that even if the amount stays at 500,000, right?
Well, we can, if these funds are committed but not fully expended, that's okay. We just can't count on them to. I'm not sure if that's what you were asking, but if we
Well,
didn't spend all of the 500,000
No, I get
in this
that,
year,
but,
okay.
but even if all of the 500,000 was spent
Yes.
for step 1, the funds for the subsequent steps.
Yeah, that part we have no idea.
Yeah, exactly. So that's sort
Yes.
of like, I mean.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think about, like,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
we
yeah,
got halfway into demolition but then didn't have the rest of the funds, what?
So just a clarification, so the $8 million, the returning TIF, that's an ongoing allocation for us. That'll be our new baseline, but it's also subject to general fund cuts. So if we have more cuts next year, that what was 8 million, that's now 7.6 could be 7 next year. So we could have funds left over like this next year after we pay for staff, or we could have not even have enough to pay for staff. So, you know, given where we are with the transition, and we're still not sure how much some of that's going to cost each bureau to pay for other staff, it is dicey to say, oh, we're going to spend, you know, we'll take the other half out of next year. Like I said, there's always a risk, but we do that all the time. I'm not advocating for that because I'm very risk averse, but this is an ongoing allocation for us. So we could potentially have 2.3 this time next year that we're trying to do the same thing with. That's a one-time, that we're looking at it as one time because we're not going to fund ongoing programs. So what can we do with that, with those funds each year? And it might be a little bit different each year.
Right, right. I think for me, I just keep coming back to, so we've got this pot of one-time funds, and we're trying to figure out how to best utilize them to get most effective for households, for real people. And doing a little bit deconstruction community outreach on this particular property, despite the fact that there's a real cost to it every day with the systems and security and all of that, just seems like the wrong approach in a crisis. So I'll just say
That's
that.
okay, yeah.
Yeah. That's so
decisive.
So decisive. Choices have to be made.
You know,
Choices
it's
must be
getting
made.
late. I want to be bold and decisive.
I want to
Jump on my ship.
I'd like to get on there and just say, I would suggest we move that 500,000 over to the grants for
I agree.
Central and Northeast.
Thank you, Sarah.
Felicia.
Oh, I support that.
Okay. Desi, Anna, any thoughts, reactions?
I would support that as well. And it also would say that having sites prepared for our community partners where there's sufficient site investigations done and the sites prepared so that cost doesn't have to be passed on to our partners, is our developers, nonprofit developers and others. That's also something to flag that, but I would support that decision to move it over for now. Yeah.
I see you're on screen, Anna.
I don't really have much to say on this, but I support what the rest of the committee wants to do.
Cool. Thank you, Anna. Okay, so we've had a lot of movement. Let's just tick down the list from the top and see where we're at. Master planner for Ellington redevelopment. Keep it, delete it. We are. You all don't have to. It would be great if we got to 2.3 with strong consensus on how to do it.
Do you envision this as a phased development? So you're master planning it, and then you're planning to RFP out different phases? Or are you thinking Home Forward would be your developer?
I don't think we're assuming that. Tanya, I don't know if you want to weigh in, but this is the idea is that we would have a master plan and that we would RFP the development work.
Okay.
I think, yes.
Just because it's helpful to have your developer as part of the master planning process. I know there's a chicken egg thing if you need to master plan it in order to phase it out. Also with and maybe this all changes, maybe all the bond constraints change soon if we get some federal legislation that reduces the bond cap problem or the allocation problem. But right now, I mean, anything big, you're best off with a housing authority as a developer because the rest of us are having a hard time getting allocations.
Yeah. Tanya, is there anything from that you want to chime in
Yeah, I'll
on?
just say we're hoping that the master plan will inform how we're going to RFP out that. We do, the only thing that we kind of know for sure is that we would look to some kind of phased development just so we could reduce on-site displacement and relocation.
So, Michael, if you kept the master plan, the preservation funds for affordable housing, the PSH providers, and the down payment assistance loans, those would get you to the 2.3 if you just shave off like 100,000 from the down payment assistance loans, if I'm doing my math right. Oh, I was trying to get to 2.3, so. But if you also you could still get there moving that Mount Tabor money over there and not doing the master plan, Ellington. But if you wanted to do the master plan, preservation funding for affordable housing, additional grants to PSH providers, and the down payment assistance loans, and shave off $100,000 from the down payment assistance loans, if I'm right, it could get you there too.
Yes, but I think folks encouraged us to move the Mount Tabor money into the grants for Central City and Northeast. So that one's at $1 million right now.
Well, I think the question, so if we do all this moving, we're at 2.9.
We're getting there.
So then I think the question is, could we live with 2.9? Could we get 2.9? Does it have to be 2.3?
Did I encourage boldness?
Boldness and decisive.
Miss Laura, I appreciate that you are shooting for the, you are shooting the threes.
I always look big.
You are shooting the threes over there.
Right,
I appreciate
that's right.
But
That's
yeah,
right. Yeah.
at this point, it's 2.3.
Yeah, okay.
hope.
So no, that's really good because, I mean, that really sort of sizes it. So we're at 2.9. So we have to shave off 600,000. Well, that was sort of my point. We could leave it at 2.9, let you guys do the hard shaving. You know, you guys get the grader out.
And we still have to go to Commissioner Rubio and walk her through these, and she may have a slightly different combination.
If you go to her with 2.9, she might get to do the shaving.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Great.
I'll get you all a grader.
That was so great. All right. As we are closing out, I think I just want to go back around to each of the committee members for any last thoughts or questions or amendments.
I just want to say thank you again for the opportunity. I'm not a housing developer. I don't play one on TV. I don't pretend to know much about it, but I know how important it is for our clients. Just as a reminder, Pilot Project doesn't own or manage any housing. We depend on housing providers, whether they're CDC or private housing providers, to house the older adults that we work with. So I appreciate being in this space with experienced, intelligent people, and thank you for the opportunity.
I'll just say likewise. Thank you. It is a privilege to sit here, and it's nice to meet you in person for the first time. So this is great.
Awesome. Thanks.
Miss Laura, you can always be our bold one. I appreciate it. And I too thank you guys. You know, for us, Laura, Sarah, and myself, the PHB has seen us for many years.
You're the seasoned ones.
Yeah. And they still want us to come back. And so we really appreciate you. We know these are tough decisions that you have to make. And, you know, we we do this work because we really care about who is in the buildings, and we want to make sure that for all our residents here in this city, that to us, housing is a right, not a privilege. And that's why Sarah and I do this work. And that's why you guys do this work, and we really, really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thanks so much. Desi, Anna, closing thoughts?
I just wanted to echo that, just to say thank you, and very inspiring. And it really is the issues that were raised is really why this work is so important. And so just appreciative of everybody and the chance to weigh in. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to serve on this committee. It's a real privilege for me. I think it's a rough budget year, and it's always frustrating to discuss all these really important priority programs we have that are serving people in dire need and having to cut anything. But I was honored to be on a committee full of people who are doing it the right way.
Awesome. Before I close it out, I just want to confirm, I don't think there's anybody present who could give public testimony. Yeah. Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure. And then I just want to make sure I recap for you all. Well, so we will circulate a draft letter that captures I think less this and more sort of what you expressed to us as priorities for us to sort of focus on. For example, sort of like working at a multi-jurisdiction systems level to address some of this stuff. And as with this, if we send it out and you think it's not quite right, tell us and we'll fix it. And speaking of feeling privileged, I feel super privileged to work with some really incredible, smart folks who have helped us get to this point. And we are deeply grateful for the feedback that you all gave us today. It's going to influence how we spend money next year and how we engage with the community. So thank you very much. All right.